Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I hope you are having a fantastic day. I actually just came back from sports right now, so I was like, okay, let's actually make this first video happen because it has been a while since I've been, thinking about it and everything. So yeah, just to introduce myself a little bit, my name is Theo. As you guys might have noticed, I am actually French, so I still have this bit of accent that I'm trying to get rid of. I'm actually studying in Madrid, in Spain. I'm a second year student in a degree that is actually very new and which is called Behavioral and Social Sciences. So it is like very linked to psychology, but it opens up to a very wide range of other domains and areas. I do a lot of things in my life. Currently, like my principal job during the summer is actually being a kite surf instructor. So I'm sure most of you actually have seen or heard of this sport, which is super cool, by the way. If you can try it, just do it. I'm also a big fitness addict. Fitness and nutrition, I'll come to that later, is now a huge part of my life. And finally, videography and video editing, everything that I'm actually going to be doing with YouTube is a big part of how I actually spend my days when I have free time. So these are like the main three that I actually put a lot of time and effort in. I'm also a huge fan of personal development. If you can call it a hobby, I wouldn't maybe say so, but I think it's a way of thinking and looking at how you can actually improve yourself. And some people actually either don't take the time or don't consider it. I actually find it very pleasing to constantly try to grow and basically improve every day as a person. Even though it sounds like very cheesy, it does bring a lot of gratification, and also even on a chemical level in the brain, it does bring a lot of dopamine release. However, everything I've just told you about me is very new and it has not always been that way. You probably don't guess it, but until 1.5 years ago, I was basically on the verge of a very large depression that lasted for more than 4 years. That was actually caused by video games. So this video is mainly going to be about discussing how the video games addiction actually happened in my life, how I came across the first games, how it developed throughout my childhood, and how finally in the end I managed to get rid of it and to just basically destroy that destructive behavior, which enabled me to develop all those hobbies that I just told you about a few minutes ago. Alright, so first, a good thing to acknowledge is that I have always had this feeling, whether I was, in these bad phases of video games addiction or not, that I was living in the shadow of the person I really wanted to become, but the feel of becoming that person was not strong enough for me to actually try and make a change. This is actually one of the reasons why usually addict people don't even acknowledge or consciously realize that they are addicted, even though deep down, as I just told you, usually they know. So I will mainly try to give you the tips and the knowledge that I gathered since I actually managed to get rid of this addiction. But first, obviously, I'm gonna have to go into a bit of context, so stick with me and let's just dive right in. Alright, so everything started at around 10 years old. Up to that point, I was very lucky in the sense that I had a very loving family. We didn't have any financial problems. At the time, I was still living in France, around Lyon, so in the south. And I had, let's say, a very normal childhood. However, one thing was obvious is that I was bored. I was really bored because for me, school at the time was very easy. And I had also an easy time with sports. But boredness was still a big thing because every time I would go back from school and being done with my sports, I would just be here in the living room asking my parents, what can I do? So my dad, first, helped me to download the first game ever, which was a French game, which is called Dofus. Which is an MMORPG. So basically you develop your character and you go out through levels, the goal being reaching level 200. This is how it all started. Obviously at the time I was still very young, computers were not the computers that we have today, and it was still, as we can call it, a hobby. So at age 14 I was told that we would have to move out of France and actually move in a city called Murcia in the south of Spain for my dad's work. Obviously at 14 years old, boys, we develop a lot, we have puberty hitting and everything. So it's already let's say a pretty stressful part of development and child development. So adding on that, moving out of a country where you've been raised your whole life is actually a pretty big deal. However, thankfully enough, Spain is an amazing country, and I was fortunate enough to arrive in a French school in Murcia with a lot of incredible people. I met a lot of new friends there, and basically this year was actually a year where video games were, let's say, less present. I was way more outside. I was, also like doing the first legal parties and like everything going on. So obviously, this was probably the last year where the negative impact of video games was still not really felt. However, 15 years old, not even 9 months after we moved in Spain, I learned that we were gonna go to Switzerland, move again, not even a year in Spain, and this was really, really hard. I didn't have any expectations about Switzerland. I actually didn't know anything about Switzerland, really. And we were moving to Zurich. We're not even moving to the French port, we're moving to the German port. So obviously this was going to be a new challenge, another language, once again having to say goodbye to friends and trying to meet other people. So this whole thing in a few months is actually a lot to take on as a kid. Here, the arrival was totally different than arriving in Murcia. Obviously, the mentality of those two countries is very different. There's a different culture, different weather. Everything is very opposite in a way. And I actually didn't manage to, let's say, incorporate myself as much in the environment as I did in Spain. So I think I corresponded less to how this whole place was actually working, whether it was in school, with people in different setups. And I actually became quite unhappy and very sad. Weeks and weeks went by and I struggled to make friends, struggled to meet new people, so I stayed more and more inside. And this is when negative effects of video games actually started to appear. But at the time, it didn't look like anything negative. I just needed something to actually get my mind off of the stressful school days, of boredness, of everything, to actually enjoy myself. And this was what video games were for at the time. However, big problem with video games is that you don't see the transition from it being a hobby to being something that you actually need not to fall into depression. And that was the big problem. So video games basically became for me an outlet. Fast forward a bit, and I will actually reach 12th grade with decent grades, I must say, even without working much, because, well, I did have time, but I didn't work at all because of video games. It was way more fun, right? I still managed to pass with like a pretty good GPA, and in the end, high school went okay. The problem is that even though most of the external factors, being school grades, being links with other students, being like family relationships, were apparently okay, in my mind it was a mess. I had spent 4 years of my life where my whole days and my whole nights would rely on when is going to be the next moment I can play. At the time I actually stopped playing Dofus, and the new game I was playing, most of you probably know it, is League of Legends. I've also always had this very competitive side, which made it even harder because League of Legends was actually becoming very popular and esport was actually rising as well. So I had this growing dream in me of maybe becoming one day a professional gamer. I actually reached a pretty good level on League of Legends at the time, and basically, yeah, everything was evolving around that. It was as soon as I would go out of school, it would be coming home quick, so walking really fast to actually be able to play as fast as possible. I would eat as quick as possible. Like everything would be very quick to make this gaming time as long as possible. And this obviously leads to very problematic issues, like for instance, lack of sleep, bad alimentation. Even though, thanks God, like my mom was still cooking for me really good things, I would still like sometimes either not eat or eat really quick to actually go back to playing. Social problems as well, of course, and overall worse lifestyle, if we can call it that way. Thanks God, my parents were very forgiving and helping at the time. They always tried to understand, even though like obviously every day we would at least have one argument regarding the time I spent on video games. We would still manage to have somewhat of a good relationship with them two and my brother as well. After I graduated from high school, I actually chose to go study in Lausanne, so in the French part of Switzerland. This was a choice that was not really truthful to the things I really wanted to do. It was actually a very convenient choice because in a way I would not be at home anymore. So of course it would mean more freedom to play, and like I would not have this pressure of my parents, waking up to see me play or just like having arguments all the time. But at the same time, it was still very close so that I could go back by train in like less than 2 hours. So I tried 2 different schools there, one in mechanical engineering and one in business that I did for 2 years. I did that to the other, that's 3 years. 3 years that I actually lost because in the end I failed both of them. Why? Well, obviously because being alone and having this freedom, video games addiction went worse and worse and worse, and it just became basically my life. It became what I did. My whole thing was playing video games. Here is the tricky part. Usually it's very hard to recognize when you have an addiction, and even if you're aware of it, which is already a very rare case, you don't really want to tell it to the people you love. You don't want to say it to friends, you don't want to say it to family. In that case, family knew, but friends, the friends I met there at this new schools, they were not aware at all of it. And that's where there is a huge first problem that I encountered with actually trying to hide this addiction, is having basically a split personality. Meaning that my friends, even though I would spend some days up to 12, 14 hours gaming, they would not be aware that I was gaming. Because as soon as I could have a few minutes with them, I would pretend like something happened. I would always find a way to, trick them in a way of thinking that everything was going all right. But in the end, in my head, everything was just falling apart. However, a huge shift happened as soon as I basically had to leave the second school in Lausanne, and I basically had to go back to my parents' place. Obviously, as you can probably imagine, this was a very, very, very stressful and emotionally intense moment. Obviously, they were at the same time mad and very sad and trying to understand, but it's not easy, having your parents help you 3 years for which you're supposed to study, and in the end, realizing that you haven't done anything is it's not easy to say. And that was actually a big shift, because this whole thing of going back to your parents' place, leaving once again your friends behind, and basically going back to to start, is going back to the start, and you literally don't have anything left. This for me was a kicker. I don't know what happened, but I know something clicked in my mind, and this is when I decided to change. So me and my dad came across this platform called Game Quitters, which is basically a program and a platform that helps gamers and the ones who are addicts to basically do a detox period that lasts 3 months, to help them basically recover and find again this sense of enjoying life without video games. So this is what I did. And the whole way this program is structured is to basically try and cover the vital needs that video games actually fake to replace in your life with actual healthy activities. What do I mean by that? Well, it's very simple. Video games, they actually cover 4 vital needs, or they make you think that they cover them, but they don't really. Which are, the first one is the social aspect. They make you think you make friends online and you can have this network that builds up. And the problem is that you cannot expect the same out of people that you meet online and that you never see in person than real friends. Meaning that if anything bad happens in your life, or if internet is closed and you have something going on, they won't know and they won't care, right? Second aspect is the aspect of progression. In video games, you have this sense of always being able to achieve more, which is actually something really pleasing for the brain, because this whole process of actually increasing and improving all the time is a process that releases dopamine in the brain. The third one is instant gratification. On video games, this is one of the very narcissistic and I think the worst aspect, in my opinion, of video games is that they make you forget that things that you really want should take time to obtain. Now we've seen that they've totally deleted that dimension in video games with money. Now money is a way to basically get you from level 1 to level 100 in no time, and it makes you feel amazing. Yeah, but at what cost, right? Fourth point is that it acts as a stress reliever. However, the problem is that the games that we face today are getting more and more competitive and more complex in a way. And so this variable that used to be true, if we take games from 10 to 15 years ago, where they really were meant to actually just, enjoy a few games and have fun, are now becoming actually so mentally intense that they are not actually relieving stress anymore. So those 4 points were the ones I had to work on, and I had to replace each of them with activities throughout my day. This is how the 3-month period happened. During this search for new activities, I actually discovered a few hobbies that are still very present in my life today. The first one is fitness. Fitness and bodybuilding and everything that goes around it, so nutrition, sleep, mindset. All of those areas have actually become my principal hobby up to this day. I think that fitness, in a way, has very similar points to gaming. The difference being that, in my opinion, it is way more healthy as long as it is still controlled. But that's the thing, don't get me wrong. I'm really not trying to make video games look evil or anything. Video games are just very bad when they're not controlled, but as can anything be. The problem being that now video games are made to be addictive. So this is really like the whole point. It's not about saying that they're bad, right? And I think fitness has a lot to do with also like this sense of progression, this reward system, the fact of probably also socializing, because I met actually a few of my best friends in the gym. So this has become basically my principal hobby. And following that has basically followed the whole like personal growth and mindset development that I just enjoy a lot. Even though you could argue it's not really a hobby, it's actually a thing I really spend a lot of time doing and practicing and gathering knowledge about. Alright, so now we're basically going to try and go over the steps that actually enabled me to go from, you know, a young geek on the verge of actually fucking up his whole life towards being a man with like dreams, goals, and a lot of things going for him at the moment. So I think the first step that actually enabled me to basically, you know, well, get my life together in a way and get rid of the addiction. But the addiction could be replaced with destructive behavior or any other type of negative habit. It could really be anything in a way. So the first thing for me was becoming conscious of the problem itself. This, as I just told you before, it actually happened when I got kicked out of the second school. When I had to go back to my parents' place, leave my friends, get there with like all the tensions, all the stress that I had with me, everything that I was gonna have to tell them. This was basically an electroshock. It like just something clicked, and in my mind I knew something was actually gonna change at that point. So I believe that becoming conscious about the problems that you have is actually a very difficult step, because to become conscious, you already have to have an open mind enough to realize that the thing that you have is a problem. Usually most of the problems that we have are actually things that either we fear or we don't want to face, because it's going to be hard. Whether it's alcohol problem, whether it's a breakup problem, it can be anything. Usually you don't want to deal with those things. So becoming conscious that they are a problem is already a huge step, and it actually takes a lot of focus and a lot of work to actually make this become conscious. So the second step that I actually applied and that really helped me in figuring out which path I wanted to take is basically asking yourself, what is the best possible outcome if I chose to live the current life that I have versus the possible outcome of living the life that I wish I could live? These are two very different things, because when I came back to my parents' place, obviously like they told me, okay, at that point, like we don't want you to go back into studying because you've just lost literally 3 years and that's a lot of money, so do whatever. And at that point I was still playing, obviously, and I was actually really good, and that's, I forgot to mention that, but I transitioned to Fortnite and I was actually pretty good at the game. So obviously at the time I asked myself the question, what would be worth it? Because in the current state of affairs, like the best possible outcome for me would be to become a professional Fortnite player, hopefully, you know, make a bit of money, maybe like, I don't know, do whatever, then go into streaming, and that's it. And already just saying it, you can see how short term it is, because it's very vague. There's no real emphasis on things that actually mean a lot to me. But it all changed when I like asked myself the question, what would be the best possible outcome of the life that I would like to have? Because even though we all have destructive behaviors, we all have those little things that are very like, you know, deep down in us, but that we don't really see anymore, we don't really think of anymore, those dreams, those little aspirations. And for me, I had them. I always had the dream of traveling the world, of becoming basically an entrepreneur and being able to make money from wherever I would be in the world. That's a dream I've always kind of had, and even this mentality from a young age, I had it. But this was forgotten. So asking this question actually enabled me to realize that the path that seemed so obvious, which was this professional gamer, actually didn't make sense compared to the bigger scheme. And so that was like a huge step into like advancing to the next stage of improving and getting rid of the addiction. Another advice I would have, which helped me quite a lot, is actually splitting up all of the little processes that can help you improve or get rid of an addiction or behavior or habit or anything basically. But do it in little steps and little blocks, because usually it's very hard to start with a project. Like whenever, let's say you have an essay, for instance, like a 10,000 word essay, it's gonna be way harder to write the 10 first words than the last paragraph. Why? Because starting a process that looks so huge when you can't even see the finish line, it asks so much discipline and control over yourself that most people actually avoid it, and that's when procrastination kicks in. However, if you split everything in tiny parts, you end up with things where you always see the finish line. You know, okay, this little task that I have right here is gonna take me 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, I'm done. I see where the end point is, so I'm starting, and it doesn't require that much energy. So this is like a huge one as well. And finally, I think it's pretty linked with the one I just told you, but acknowledging the fact that it is gonna be difficult to change for the better and to get rid of everything that can be negative in your life is gonna be hard. It's gonna be hella hard. Like, you cannot just hope to get better and try to make it work without actually accepting the fact that you're not going to be comfortable at all during this whole process. This is very linked with actually one of, now I'd say, my principal philosophies of life, or pillars, which is actually getting used to discomfort. Discomfort is a thing that enables you to become your true self in any situation, because the fears that you would have of rejection, of getting hurt, of, you know, all the fears that we actually experience as human beings, you would still have them, but you would not have the fear of facing them, and that's a way different thing. Alright guys, so that's it for the first part of the video, where I basically told you a little bit more about myself and about the story I had with video games. I also hope like the few tips I gave that were still obviously very basic can still already help you in terms of destroying negative behaviors and negative habits, or even addictions, obviously. Now, second part of the video, I'm just gonna quickly introduce my plans for this channel, where I want to take it in terms of content and in terms of things I'm gonna be sharing. So first of all, good thing to know is that my summer job is actually being a kitesurf instructor. I don't know if you guys know the sport. It's like basically surfing, so you have a board, but you also use a kite. So it's a wind sport, and you can just go on water wherever. It's actually pretty crazy. So that's my summer job. So obviously this is the perfect job to travel the world and go in like super crazy places. So you can probably expect like around summer times different video edits of traveling footage and traveling videos with like a lot of kite surfing, a lot of jungle things. I'm gonna try and go in different countries over the next years. So that's like the first thing you can expect. Second, as mentioned earlier, fitness, which is like still a thing I do basically like 6 times a week, and the whole nutrition part, mindset part, I mean, I'm every day I'm into it. It's probably gonna be a huge part of the channel, so I'm gonna either try to give, you know, tips and like recipes linked with everything. There is a lot of that on YouTube already, so I'm either gonna try to find subjects that are not talking about enough, or I will just find like other ways of covering the subjects. And you can also expect some workout edits, like the first video that I've actually done on the channel. If you want to check it out, make sure to do so, because it took me like a lot of time. I'm really getting into videography and video editing, so I'm also gonna try to do, you know, those very short, like concise 3-5 minutes videos, motivational in a way that can like pump you up like before a session or anything. And finally, a big axis of this channel is gonna be personal growth and personal development. I will tell you a little bit about everything that I learned through classes and through personal work, give you some insights about the things that have actually been proven to work in order to become basically the best you ever. This sentence, you know, is used like everywhere now, like it's very cheesy. I feel like every time now we start talking about becoming a better person, it feels very cheesy. Why? Because you see many people taking advantage of the fact that this can be marketed, but in a way, most people who try, they fail at trying. And this is going to be the whole point of the channel. I'm actually going to try and help you along with me, because I'm also working on that, to not only try, but to achieve what you set yourself up to. Alright guys, so that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have any feedback, feel free to let me know in the comments, because I really appreciate that in order to actually improve the quality of the videos and of the content. Also make sure to leave a like, and also make sure to subscribe if you're interested in any of the topics that I told you I would be covering over the next years with this channel. Thank you very much for your time, and see you soon.